Trump administration came out today with some announcements. They said that Europe cannot rely on US protection, and Pete Hegseth, who is the new Defense Secretary, said that America will focus on domestic concerns and the threat of China over sending peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. And on Ukraine, I think that's fair enough, by the way. Like, European allies are going to have to pay their keep and up their defence expenditure and stop maybe giving it to migrants and spending it on bloody DEI, on focusing on gates. And Trump and Putin have held talks to start an end to the war. My question on this, so Donald Trump held his first phone call with Vladimir Putin since returning to office and agreed to visit Russia. Pretty big. The US president said he and the Russian president agreed to stop the millions of deaths and start negotiations immediately to end the war. Mr. Trump said the pair discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, and don't think Russia's winning the war there, the power of the dollar and various other subjects, and agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. I can't quite see Bad Vlad going to America, but maybe. He said the US delegation would be led by Vice President J.D. Vance, which is pretty big for him. He'll likely, I think, stands a very good chance of being the next president of the US. Of course, Donald Trump will go on a full 4 terms. A frequent critic of US military aid to Ukraine, and Marco Rubio, who is the Secretary of State, who is a bit more hawkish, shall we say, than J.D. Vance. But my question for you is, one, on Europe in general. There's been a free lunch from the United States of America far too long. And getting off your arse and spending your money on your own defence needs to happen. But the second question I have is, if President Trump, this early on in his presidency, right, he only got into office in mid-Jan, if he ends the war in Ukraine and there is a peaceful settlement, should he win the Nobel Peace Prize? Let's not forget that President Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize for saying he would intervene in Syria. And he didn't ultimately intervene in Syria, but he still won the Nobel Peace Prize. He got it given it before he'd even done anything. He just said he was going to do something and then didn't, and he got it anyway. So President Trump, if he does actually manage to win the peace in Europe, he should be the next recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. So those 2 questions. Chloe?
Perhaps. I have to say I'm no expert on what the terms are as to...
Well, clearly not very much if Obama won it.
For the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, yeah, if we're judging on that, then maybe he should do. People are a bit angry because Trump said, I think he said that he would end the war in Ukraine on his first day in office, and nearly a month later it hasn't quite happened yet. But, I knew that he was using a bit of hyperbole there when he said that. I'm very happy to see that talks have started, and hopefully he will be able to come to some kind of agreement here. And I hope it's one that both and being ambitious here, but both the left and the right will then be able to see, actually, this is a good deal. The bloodshed has ended. Because there is so much scaremongering around Trump. When I talk to normal members of the public who are not in our politics circle, and you mentioned Trump, the thing they all bring up straight away is they are absolutely terrified for the Ukrainians, because they know that Trump is going to hand the whole of Ukraine to Putin, and the Ukrainians will have their country taken away from them. They'll have no funding in Ukraine, and it will just be an absolute horrifying disaster. I really hope that he can prove to the left that that is not the case, and that he is a good negotiator, and that he will, he'll make sure that it is a fair deal for both sides where everyone can come out happy. That's what I hope, at least.
Connie, the Angel on the Hill on YouTube says Trump should have got a Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords, which is, of course, the reconciliation between Israel and states within the Middle East, Arab states within the Middle East, who, let's not forget, in the not too distant past, Israel has been engaged in war with, and yet they have these diplomatic relations now. It was a big thing. And that peace through strength, that's quite potent.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was something that I always love to remind people of when they, slag off Trump all the time. So, well, actually, during his presidency, it was the most peaceful time ever, like when you compare it to others. But the Ukraine thing, I think, as from the UK's perspective, I think it will look like we've gone back on our word if we support any deal that gives any of Ukraine to Putin.
Mm.
And I feel like as much as I agree that there should be an end to bloodshed, I think perhaps it does. Russia are going to make it look like they've won because Europe has given in, and the US and given them whatever bit they might have got. I'm not saying that's necessarily what Trump is going to do, but I feel like that's probably the most likely outcome. But again, we cannot go on continuing in the way that we are funding this war. There has to
Hmm.
be an end to it. So
Hmm.
something has to be done. But ultimately, yeah, I think it is going to reflect poorly if Putin is given anything. But I feel like perhaps we're just going to have to take the L on that.
Yes, take the L. I think that's a youth phrase. I think, Elliott, that the Front National stance on this, the Alternative for Deutschland stance on this, they would all, on the right of European politics, they would all say that actually they agree that the land that Russia has taken, which Russia argues is Russia friendly, as in if they held a referendum and they said, look, I want to be part of Russia, not Ukraine, that they ought to keep them, and then we have peace and prosperity, and Europe can move on.
Yeah,
Is that where you are, is my question.
it's not where I am. Those parties, especially I know about the National Rally particularly because I used to obviously live there, but they were historically very pro-Russia. For example, Le Pen, met with Putin multiple times. Elected party members get sent over to Russia to verify the elections over there. And the same with the AfD. I mean, their main point of support for Russia is the energy policies and how it's cheaper,
Which was mad.
Which was, yeah. But no, I mean, I can't see Russia giving away what they've already taken because that would look weak.
No.
And we know Putin is not someone who, whether you like him or not, he's not going to step back and just say, yeah, fine, we've done all this fighting. We've been involved in the deadliest conflict since World War II, and we're just going to give up everything we've won. Especially when his belief is that it's a historical aspect of Russia because of the Russian-speaking people that live in those regions. But look, I don't think that's going to happen. And even for Trump, I feel like he's kind of going to get stitched up because of that. Because if he makes a deal where they say, look, you stop the war, but you keep the land you've already got and you don't go any further, I think at this point that would be pretty good for Ukraine, if I'm being honest. But I feel like the left are going to start blaming Trump and saying, oh, well, you just let Putin take all this land and Ukraine have lost all this land because of you, when it's set up to fail, basically.